Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton, here with Brandon. Got a couple of things to talk about this week, starting with the IanTCGxCardMarket Tournament from last weekend. Overall, seemed to be a pretty rousing success. The tournament itself went really well. 36 people played. A lot of different decks. Most importantly, I think, the tournament went well. I was popping in and out throughout the course of the day, and it seemed that once they got going, it was run very effectively, run very efficiently, that the Discord model worked, that there weren't a whole lot of technical problems, and overall, I think this tournament was a success, Brandon.
Absolutely. I think that one of the big things that helped with that as well as the bots that Ian had put in place already. Looking at the stuff that they did with the Bushy Road remote fight, essentially they had Bushy Road staff members essentially putting together those lists as they would go, which ended up taking a little bit more time and extending those tournaments out. With using the bots to automatically match those pairings, I think that helped out quite considerably to help speed up that process, as well as just having that ready to go, I think really helped. It was also fun to be on the other side with Ian and Jimmy kind of having that kind of conversation, to be able to look at and have the deck lists available. Also helped, I think, both the viewer and even the commentators too, to be able to know what cards are being placed when, to be able to have those ready to go for interacting with what's going on in the game state itself.
Yeah, I think the format was really solid. I think that, like you said, the open deck lists were great. As far as the tournament itself goes, interesting assortment of decks. Ultimately, Goblin Slayer wins. 3 different Bang Dream decks end up in the top 8. A Fate deck, a Slime deck, AOT, and Sword Art. So a lot of the stuff that I think you would expect in a more meta-driven environment, things like we saw like an Excel World, we saw Persona 5.
To be fair, we also saw Bunny Girl Senpai make the cut this time around too.
Yeah.
Some of the decks that you mentioned there are decks that are newer to the set that wouldn't have been in the WSI. But Bunny Girl Senpai was a deck that was available, at least during that time, but wasn't one that was chosen for that. Because like some of the sets you mentioned being like Slime, Adventure Time, sets that just recently came out.
Yeah, I think I was expecting to see more of the new stuff. We had a couple of Konosuba lists, 3 people played Slime, but overall, again, like I said, a very diverse group of decks.
There's definitely a lot of variety in this one. There wasn't necessarily too much, like it wasn't like a full like single focused, hey, you're going to see these couple decks repetitively over and over every matchup. There was a lot more variety there.
Right.
And I think that's something that we may see continued on, especially as we get more and more time away from official tournaments.
Yeah. And I think we're also going to see more. I think we're going to see more experimentation in events like this until we start getting something more official. So yeah, taking a quick peek at the top 8 though specifically, like I mentioned, Goblin Slayer winning this tournament, piloted by Vince, who also played a Goblin Slayer list in the Invitationals this summer. Very different list this time. A lot more heal focused, a lot more red-blue. Didn't play the Dwarf Shaman that he played last time. Very heal focused, and I think that one of the things with Goblin Slayer that has been its Achilles heel is its inability to close games. This deck doesn't try to rectify that situation necessarily, as much as it tries to go all in on staying alive, right? A lot of on-play heal. The 3/4 heal event, the Resurrection event is here. The 3/3 Gate Scroll that bounces something that's in battle. The 3/2 Witch that scries when you take damage. A lot of stuff designed here to mitigate damage, mitigate attacks, and heal back as quickly as possible. I like this emphasis, and I think that trying to intentionally go all in on this worked really well, and kind of abandoning the level 3 combo concept and instead just going for the level 1 salvage combo and then running the standby as well. I think this works. It's a lot more red heavy. I'm intrigued by this list, and I think I don't know. I thought it made a lot of sense. I think that focusing on what the set does well and trying to do that very intentionally, and maybe not trying to focus on getting an end game combo, it takes away some of the variability at the top. Like, it's hard to loop that priestess combo over and over again sometimes, right? In this case, you don't have to. You're able to standby in your back row pieces that you need at levels 2 and 3. Basically, whenever you play anything from hand, you're healing. So I was impressed with this list. I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a link in the description to video from gameplay featuring this deck and others on IanTCG. We'll put that link in the description. The rest of the top 8, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of Bang Dream, 3 Bang Dream decks, including 2 in the top 4, 1 Fate, 1 Slime, 1 AOT, and 1 SAO. These were pretty standard meta lists for the most part. What do you think, Brandon? What did you see out of the top 8 that interested you?
For me, a lot of what I see with the top 8 here, a lot of different titles in the top 8, which I think is, again, a good sign, a good symbol of a healthy meta, that you have all of these decks that compete at about the same level. All these players are good players, so being able to see these players use these decks effectively and play them to some of their strengths, I think is really interesting to see. I think it's interesting also, just from the newer stuff. I mean, obviously with Bang Dream, you have the newest Bang Dream release cards influence in there in the top 8, and you have Slime in the top 8. The other decks being decks that we've seen before but have seen perform well, I think is also really good to know, kind of so that you still have value in those decks. They're not completely overwhelmed by the newest sets coming out.
So yeah, that was the IanTCG Card Market Tournament. Again, link to gameplay in the description, as well as a link to Vince's Goblin Slayer list. In the meantime, once this tournament wrapped up, we got an announcement for what's coming up next for us in the English meta. Data Live, obviously a big set. JP ban list drops. Brandon, walk us through what happened with the ban list and what that means for Data Live in English.
So JP just put out their most recent ban list, hitting a variety of things that were expected for the JP meta. The one big thing that's important to see from that was Data Live being hit. Because we recognize that Data Live still has not yet been released into English. Following that ban, Bushiroad did put out notice that, hey, when English Data Live does get released, they're not immediately banning cards. They're also not changing cards. So there will at least be a period of time where we will have unrestricted Data Live in the English format.
You also mentioned to me before we started recording that when one of the cards, which is getting an art change for the English release, was shown by Bushiroad with the new art to show what changes have been made, they also showed us what traits were on that card. And those traits tell us a lot about what from Fujimi Bunko is available to Data Live players when this set drops in English.
Yes.
Can you explain what that looks like?
So, Data Live, at the same time as all this was happening, Adventure Time just coming out, Data Live got the release date being March 26th of 2021. Alongside that, we did get the art style change for the Within the Frozen Barrier Yoshino. Putting the art change aside, what's really interesting was the traits.
Right, because the only thing that changed about the card was the art. Like, the card text is no different. Mm-hmm. But the thing that matters is that they showed us what traits are on the card.
Yes.
And what traits they will be when they translate it into English.
They showed us essentially the English translation of this card. So it's technically our first English translation card for Data Live. And with that, they translated Date and then Celestial Spirit. That is the same trait, Celestial Spirit, that's used in Fujimi Bunko's Data Live cards, which are Neo Standard And they reconfirm that with that posting, that they are Neo Standard with Data Live.
So is it only the Data Live cards from Fujimi Bunko that are playable with the new Data Live cards, or is anything from Fujimi Bunko playable with Data Live?
No, not all of the cards from Fujimi Bunko, but the cards that are specifically with the tag FDL, those are the ones that are compatible with Data Live.
Data Live being DAL.
Yes. So, yes, 2 different trait types, but I mean, we see that as well in other sets in English as well. Thinking mainly Fate Zero and Fate being FZ and FS.
This is the first time they've worked with essentially adding something to what's already been released in Fujimi Bunko. So, obviously it made sense that, the Data Live cards from Bunko would be showing up in the new Data Live set, or at least playable with the new Data Live set to some extent.
It looked like those cards may not be able to initially interact as well or as cleanly as they do. There are some cards in that set with that tag that do not have Celestial Spirit as one of their traits, so they're not going to play as nice.
Right. The most important thing here is the trait, the Celestial Spirit trait.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of stuff still in Fujimi Bunko that is not only legally usable but practically usable, potentially, with the new Data Live stuff.
There's at least potential. At least gives us an opportunity to play with and mess around with. There are a couple cards that may end up making it into some of the English version sets, especially if English does get a true ban list with Data Live post-release, post-tournament play. It may come to the idea that, hey, we may have to use some of these cards to better play with the set.
And that's really curious to me. Like, the fact that they are releasing Data Live completely unfettered, with no restrictions, no changes. That's an interesting choice. I don't know if this is Bushiroad preparing for the eventuality of a ban list, or are they maybe saying, we don't think that Data Live is going to be oppressive in this meta? Which is an interesting choice, if that's the case.
Yeah, we will see. I have my suspicions. I'm still on the train of Data Live is just a show of power creep that's going to exist within Weiss. The other sets, as they come out, will continue to show and demonstrate some of this power creep as well. But, I mean, we're also still looking at, like, hey, this is March. We're still a good 4 months out from this even coming into English.
Right.
So.
But, obviously, no competitive events at, like, the regional level between now and then. So, whatever the next competitive major event meta looks like, Data Live is going to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
So what are specifically a couple of the cards from Fujimi Bunko that could be interesting in a future Data Live build?
I mean, it's definitely worth looking at. There's a couple of cards that I think are immediately more interesting. One of them being the Origami and Kurumi Restander. I mean, Data Live Harry has such a varied top end and has such a productive top end that it may not even be worth adding to the list itself, but having a Restander in the set additionally to what already exists is helpful, especially when its colors line up with the colors you're normally playing, in this case blue. There's a 1/1 that I think is also interesting that allows you to pay 2 heal when you tap it. So having a healer, a back row healer. This is information that I recognized and realized today, and confirmed with a couple other people that, hey, this actually is a thing. Because I reached out not only to my locals, but I reached out to Carmen from Technically Burn One and Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz, just to confirm that I'm not losing it, that the Data Life, the Celestial Spirit trait was indeed the same. That's something that we were previously under the impression wasn't going to be the same. The translation that we've been playing off of has been kind of like Spirit DL for Data Live. So we suspected that that trait was going to be different. So it is not different. It does appear to be the same. Not to mention that Bushiroad could just say, hey, by the way, this is actually going to be different. We're going to change it anyway.
Right. Yeah. As of right now, it doesn't seem like that's the case, though, because they have said we're not changing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems unlikely at this point that they would change things. If they do change things, it's a decision that they have not made yet.
I think it's worth knowing.
Yep. This is probably the most interesting English release in Weiss in a long time. Not just because of the set itself, but because of what it means for the meta going forward. And like you mentioned, we've talked about this before, the meta's getting more powerful, and Data Live might be like a milestone moment where things get more powerful permanently. Could be interesting, because the last few years been pretty consistent power levels, AOT notwithstanding. Like, AOT definitely has been, the more outsized powerful deck to come out, pre 2019. But
and I think instead of powerful, I think you should look at consistent. I think that was one of the most consistent decks.
Yeah,
and it's hard to find that same level of consistency as across decks. I think that Data Live here has the potential to have that similar consistency,
while also having a more powerful top end.
Yes,
that's intense. We'll see how it goes, but like we've talked about before, like this could be a defining moment for the meta. But who knows? We still don't know what else might be released before we get to competitive events again. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, March 26th, that's the day Data Live comes out in 2021, and we'll see what happens then. Also worth noting, as long as we're talking about other things that are coming out in the future, the full list of the JP release of Fate is up. Link in the description. Nothing really new there that we wanted to immediately talk about. That came out this morning, and there wasn't anything that immediately popped off the page and immediately required conversation. But the full list is out. You can look at it. Link in the description. That comes out in JP at the end of this week. And it has been officially announced for English, just to reiterate. We always knew it was happening, but it has been announced for English. We currently anticipate a summer release, but who actually knows, because it's Bushiroad and they do what they want.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Realistically, I think that Fate is going to be one of those things that could potentially be in this, new meta that we've talked about with Data Live, among other things. So we'll see what happens with that. But for now, worth noting, it's here. You can check out that list in its entirety, link in the description. I believe that's everything that we wanted to get to today.
Yes, I believe that is true.
A lot of information to digest as 2021 and hopefully a return to a competitive regional environment beckons. So whether that happens or not, whether that is online or in person, we're going to try really hard to be ready for it. So hopefully this was interesting and helpful towards that end. We've got more stuff coming, of course. Open gameplay on Thursday. I will have a deck on Tuesday, and then the following Thursday gameplay for that. And of course, in 2 weeks, we will be back with another Clock Talk. Maybe we will have an event between now and then to talk about. That's still up in the air. We might be going online. Who knows? Everything is weird and time is a flat circle. But until next time, thank you for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And have a good one.
We'll see you then.